A few times we've brought Paul Kagame to the channel. We've seen his speeches, we've seen his interviews, and it seems a good number of you who watch the channel like him. So today I'm bringing a video, and this one is titled Rwandan President Paul Kagame Shuts Down Western Journalists. I've seen a clip of this, I think, a few times now on TikTok and probably on YouTube as well. I'm just going to give you a brief, but we're still going to watch the full video because that's the real interest. He's basically against what people dictate to him as democracy. It's like, why are you telling us what to do? We define the democracy in our nations. Listen.
Maybe you need to be looking around in Europe. You are violating people's rights. When we have this problem of people being bundled and sent back to sink in the Mediterranean and so on, and so many people being mistreated in your own countries, I think I want to turn it to you and say, prove me guilty.
This is President Paul Kagame, the man who took Rwanda out of genocide and has been in charge of the country for the past 20 years, having taken office in the year 2000. And these three are media personalities, as we are going to see their relevance shortly. In Rwanda, a president is democratically elected for a term of 7 years. Kagame has ruled for 3 terms, all which he emerged victorious by landslides.
The people like him. Even on the comments, in my comments, people keep saying he's a good president, and people say go Paul or go Kagame or something. But people seem to like him. Usually when presidents rule for too long, people start, or at least the support starts declining. But Paul Kagame seems consistent. You see, he won 3 times by a landslide.
President Kagame is known to openly object to most Western demands, while at the same time moving eastwards to work with Arabs and the Chinese. This is the point where we begin seeing hate towards black leaders and all kinds of Western calamities, as they progressively start becoming intolerant to Western demands. If anything goes against Western interests, a leader will often face incentivized media that calls for them to step down or resign, alleged accusations of human rights violations and being undemocratic. In this clip, I'll show you how exactly the Western media, and most European citizens for that matter, character assassinates such a leader. Using President Kagame as an example, this is how he dealt with them.
Hi, call me Louis. This is my sport. Louis Sport.
Richard Quest. On the 6th of February 2021, a CNN journalist, Richard Quest, flew to Rwanda from Brussels, and on the 18th, CNN released this interview of him with President Paul Kagame.
There's no Western leader that has been in office as long as you have.
Do I care about that?
Because
The Western leader is a Western leader.
Because electorates normally normally throw people out. The nature of electorates and democracies is that people get tired of it and they move to another person.
That is if you are telling me, that everyone has to conform to what the West tells us to do. I'm not one of those people.
I like that. I like that response. And he's not even shouting, very calm and collected. Yeah.
The Western world is a world on its own. It has many good things that they do. It has many bad things they do.
There's no democratically elected leader in a generally accepted democracy that has been in office as long as you.
Democracy is not defined by the West. No. If it does, then what happens of the contradictions that happen in the West? Where we find countries in the West, they elect their leaders, and then they turn around and start complaining about the same leaders they have elected. So you are telling me democracy, therefore, has imperfections, whether it is in the West or anywhere else. So, but I cannot live by or leave the imperfections of the West.
Very good response. And a lot of Africans are beginning to think this way. I was watching this house rep in Ghana. I think his name is Sam George. He said the same thing, that Africa, we need to redefine what democracy means to Africa. And I really, really do support that. Because the rules of a nation, the principles, the governance of a nation should be reflective of the values of the people. And if that is not the case, then there is a misalignment. So yeah, what Paul Kagame said here is true. Africa cannot lead like the West, lives. But that does not mean I'm supporting or I'm against him ruling for as long as he has. I'm not in Rwanda. I cannot make that say. If that's what the people want, so be it.
24th June 2019, France 24 English releases the interview with the Rwanda President Catherine Nicholson and European Union Development Commissioner Neven Mimika. This is how it went down.
To say something to that, because I think this kind of discussion, which has gone on for a very long time around, sounds a bit cynical in a sense. In fact, it's like the tragic situation of 1994 isn't considered even a violation of human rights. It has now gone into the background. Those who are responsible for it, those who are associated with it, are now talking about something else. According to them, the situation in Rwanda is that of human rights violation, even more than that tragic situation. I think that's what we are talking about. So,
well, just for example, there was an Amnesty International wrote a report in the lead up to the 2017 election that talks about opposition politicians, journalists, human rights defenders being jailed, physically attacked, even killed.
I think you're interested in
forced into exile or silence. So just interested in your idea of that assessment of your country.
Raising your views to the audience so that you influence them by
the European Union sees itself very much as an exporter of human rights and a defender of human rights.
So why can't you let me answer this?
I'm very interested
Otherwise,
in your answer.
you are going to ask and then answer yourself.
I'm very interested in your answer. I'm giving you some context on why I'm asking.
You're asking and giving answer at the same time. So
please tell me, what do you make of this assessment?
I think it's just ridiculous, because there is nothing like human rights minus these things we are talking about. What we are talking about in terms of development. These are human rights. Development, schools, education, health, and food security. And, when you see now the level of poverty has decreased almost by 60%. So these people, these human beings with improved lives and participating in that themselves to improve their own lives, gets lost in the whole list you've been spelling out as if, what is in Rwanda is really hell. In fact, forgetting the hell that we have gone through, that we stood against and sorted out when you were there just talking about more or less nonsense. Because
do you reject the accusations, for example, from Amnesty International?
Absolute rubbish.
You reject
Rwanda
that?
is completely different from what it was 25 years ago. In fact, maybe you need to be looking around in Europe. You are violating people's rights. When we have this problem of people being bundled and sent back to sink in the Mediterranean and so on, and so many people being mistreated in your own countries, why don't you talk about your human rights and stop just offloading everything?
Well, this is a development conversation, so in the context of development.
You are not the one to determine what conversation or what points to raise in any conversation. You are asking questions, this is what I'm saying, you are asking questions and you are giving yourself answers. And you really...
Paul Kagame, he said you're not the one to determine the conversation. You're asking questions and I'm giving answers. Yeah. You see, sometimes it's important to establish who is the authority in the room. But I do have a question though. Why is it that the journalists out there can just come and interview presidents in Africa and then want to take charge of the interview session? I don't know of any Nigerian journalist that has interviewed. I'm just using Nigeria as an example, but I don't know of any Nigerian journalist that has interviewed Joe Biden or interviewed Emmanuel Macron. Maybe there might be, but I'd like to see that more, because what I've been seeing is these journalists come to Africa and they talk to the presidents and they want to take charge. I mean, you have to understand that. I know you're a journalist, you have to push and ask the questions, but he's also the president. So be tricky a little bit when you're asking him the questions. I might be biased in my comments. Trust me, I might be biased and I know that, but it just is what it is.
You really need to stop this superiority complex nonsense about human rights. You think you are the only ones who respect human rights, or others it's about violating human rights. No, we've fought for human rights and freedoms of our people much better and more than anyone, including you people who keep talking about this nonsense. Where we have taken our country from and where it is now speaks for itself. The rest of the stories just comes from this complex. You know, these two worlds where there are people who know everything about human rights and all kinds of things, and another world where people are just people who don't know. But these are our human rights. It's not, when we respect the things we respect in our countries, it's not for you, it's not for anybody else, it's for ourselves.
Is it not
So
universal?
you don't sit there. Yes, it is universal, but you don't sit there. If it is universal and you believe it, then you don't become the judge yourself. You don't start telling the others what to do, what they should not do, or that what they are doing is not to your satisfaction. Who are you?
Well, I'm not sure if we're talking about me personally.
Well, you are the one actually raising these questions. So I think
So he's talking to you.
you better interpret it properly so that it is well understood.
Okay.
I could see you are asking questions in a manner that you want to influence the ones listening to us. But that's not correct.
Okay. Yeah. I'm raising it once again in the context of the United Nations Development Goals.
No, United Nations is us. You see,
course.
United Nations is not something alien somewhere else.
Yeah.
It's actually us. We participate
and the
in
framework for this entire development
And by the way, I had been leading the Millennium Development Goals before Sustainable Development Goals. I was the co-chair of that with other leaders and some of the leaders in Europe. So you don't turn around, it's like you want...
So you believe that there should be scrutiny on human rights in Europe, in Africa,
No,
in
I
all
believe
countries?
that you shouldn't be there belittling Africans or leaders of Africa who are trying
Well,
to...
no, but the conversation about migration is a real conversation about human rights. So you believe that there are valid human rights concerns to be taken into account in this conversation?
Even in Europe.
Honestly, I do admire her persistence because it could be intimidating when you sit in front of a president and he stands his ground, establishes himself as the authority. As a journalist, you might get timid, even though you have some experience. But she's persistent. So I do admire that because she's a journalist and she has a job to do still.
Not in Africa.
Not in Africa.
In Europe. In Europe, not only in Africa.
Not, of course.
Yes.
An identified young lady from the press. On 19th September 2017, Richard Stengel had sit down with President Kagame on almost similar topics when a young lady from the press rose to ask this question.
You've spoken a lot about democracy, and I would just like to point to the accusations of human rights abuses in terms of the elimination of your political opponents or the oppression of the press, and I would just like to hear your comments towards that.
Why is it that they keep asking this question? Like, I'll throw these questions to the Rwandans. Is that how you call somebody from Rwanda? I'm sorry if I ruined that, but I'm throwing this question to the people of Rwanda. Did he do all these things he's been accused of? Because it seems this question has been consistent amongst the interviewers we've seen. And two things. It's either he did this or they're trying to establish a context where it feels like or where it looks like he did this or where it looks like he's not a good president and has to be overthrown because he's trampling upon human rights and all of those things. So let me know what your opinion or what you think of this matter or this subject.
No, I would like to hear your comments because for me, it's like, it's always difficult to accuse me of anything and then say, prove yourself innocent. I think I want to turn it to you and say, prove me guilty. That's where the problem lies. The press or human rights groups, or what they say about me personally or about Rwanda when you are in Rwanda and are dealing with these decent human beings also in Rwanda, and they tell you their own stories, you won't trace even 0.001% of what they're talking about. Oh. The real life there is completely different from what the young girl is talking about. Absolutely different. But people will stay here, will be here in the US and wherever, and they've never even been to Rwanda, they've never met Rwandans. The real Rwandans, they are there. Rwandans are there. The real people of Rwanda who are no different from you, what you aspire to be, to have, to do, they are no different. But it's as if Rwandans, Rwanda is treated like a botanical garden where you just go and water flowers and, you know, no, human beings like anyone in this room. Absolutely. So these so-called human don't know what. I tell you, half of my life I've been living in the trenches, not sure of living to the next day. I didn't fight to be the president of my country. Never. It came by accident, I think. So I was fighting for my own rights, which anyone in any human rights organization could not give me. And even now cannot give me or cannot give Rwandans. So it's cynical and absurd that anyone would just be there talking about violations, you know, me as the leader of my own people to be accused of violating their rights. It's just an absurd insult.
Alright guys, so that's it for this video.
Okay, so we've heard it from Paul Kagame. And the thing is, I don't think I've seen any journalist from Rwanda accusing Paul Kagame of this. Or if there is any, please feel free to let me know. We'll check it out. It seems the accusations only come from the people who might not be living in Uganda. So the question would be, how did they get all this information? Again, I don't know. I'm not saying this is true or this is false. But until it's proven and I see like a whole factual statement or a document that shows Paul Kagame is responsible for all these things, maybe I would believe, you know. But until then, consider everything speculative. Here's the end of this video. Share your thoughts, smash the like button, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.